This is something I'm concerned about with the first 5G compatible phones, is that they're just not going to be very good. There's going to be so many mistakes and oversights because there is this rush to the finish line.
Is that what happened with 4G as well? I'm trying to recall now, but I mean, Apple didn't rush to get a 4G phone.
No, you're talking before my time there, Ian. You know,
No,
I was still, you know,
he was still running around the valleys. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Sincere apologies for not doing one for a couple of weeks, but I'm pretty sure it's Pierre's fault. Was it your fault, Pierre?
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was. Okay, jolly good. As long as it wasn't my fault. Right, I am joined this week by the usual suspects. Jamie, who's staring at a phone, but actually for once has a legitimate reason for doing so, which hopefully we'll get onto later. And Ian from Light Reading. This week we're going to be talking about, we've all been on our travels, so we're going to be talking about Broadband World Forum. We're going to be talking about Qualcomm in Hong Kong, and then other stuff that's been going on this week while we haven't been travelling around. It's been quarterly season, so there's plenty of Q3 numbers to talk about, and then hopefully we'll culminate on this phone that Jamie finds so much more interesting than he does human beings. Cool. Have I done everything? Oh no, we got to do the thing. There's always one thing I forget. So if you're watching this on the site or on Facebook, you can listen to it on iTunes or SoundCloud, and if you listen to it, you can watch it on the site or on Facebook.
Also on YouTube.
Or on YouTube. Are we putting on YouTube now? Did I know that?
We're everywhere. Yeah.
We're just everywhere. Multi-channel us. Okay. So Broadband World Forum, I'm going to start with you guys. You were both there. Let's just throw it to Jamie, just so that I can interrupt the golf game that you're playing right now. Broadband World Forum in Berlin. How was it?
yeah, it was good. It's good. I thought it was.
Terrible weather.
Yeah, I mean, it
Terrible city.
rains constantly. It's really boring. There's not really much to do.
You're not selling it to me.
We did drink some absinthe.
Yeah,
You did.
you drank some
You
absinthe.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
put that on Facebook, didn't you?
Yeah.
I thought, oh dear, Ian.
Well,
What's
these-
that wise?
Yeah,
It was a mix
It
of
wasn't
other
wise. I
stuff.
got asked about it when I got home.
Oh, did you?
So, yeah.
Well,
These
It's
these
the
two
first thing I got asked as I walked through the door. Why were you drinking absinthe?
I can imagine that.
these two idiots decided to go on to cocktails.
He was on tequila.
He was on this
Mine was
tequila
great.
twist.
Right.
He was
Oh,
on
yes, if
something-
Pierre was there with you.
Yeah,
I was,
he was
the
on-
odd one out here.
I don't know what it was,
It's called rapscallion.
and I just had
Scandal.
I just stuck to IPA. It
Right.
was fine.
And were they quite up by the end of the night?
It was alright. You know, I mean, we had a
What was the
couple.
next day?
We tucked into a couple of bottles of wines before that.
Yeah.
Couple
So you
of
did
beers.
alright.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, Berlin not great. The show was pretty good. I mean, I thought there was plenty of interesting stuff on the stage. You know, NBN. I mean, they did well in getting some good people out there. In all fairness, NBN came across and did their presentation. The Chorus presentation was very interesting as well, just to keep it on the idea of shared network infrastructure there. OpenReach were over there as well. BT got some really, really interesting stuff, and then there was a brilliant panel session, I thought, or at least the first half, on investments. So they had a few sort of like fibre orientated telcos up there, and then also Amber Investments, which is bought into City Fibre,
Right.
and a chap from the European Investment Bank as well. So there was some really interesting stuff out there, I thought.
Okay, cool. What about you, Ian? Do you share
Yeah.
Jamie's recollections?
There were good speakers, definitely, and some of the presentations were pretty good. The downside, I think, is it's an event where it's nice, I think, to come away from conferences feeling there's like a sort of theme to it.
Right.
And if you go to an SDN conference, then obviously everybody's talking about SDN. If you go to TIP, everybody's talking about open
Infrastructure,
networks.
Yeah, on open networks, yeah. We can
And
talk
this
about TIP in a
one
bit, actually.
is, because broadband's such an all-encompassing term now,
Yeah.
and so many things feed into it, it's become a little bit it's just a sort of telecom event. They might
Just
as well call it the
telecoms in general.
Telecom Forum.
So what? So it's
And-
not just talking about sort of fibre and
It's
G-Fast
not. And one thing
and
that came
sort
up
of thing.
a lot, and they were good presentations and the points were interesting, but one thing that came up a lot, which you'd never have heard about before, was 5G.
Right.
I don't remember people talking about 4G particularly at the Broadband World Forum in the past, but
No,
because
because
5G's
Informer's got its wireless big event, which is the 5G branded one now.
yeah.
But
That's a
This is
massive,
supposed to be-
massive overlap. You could have been at the 5G World Summit
right.
For some of the presentations.
Is Ericsson there at all?
Yeah,
Because
Ericsson
Ericsson's
was
never normally at broadband because
they
because they
certainly
don't
had,
really do
I don't
anything
know if they
fixed
had,
line, do they?
Actually, I don't know if they had a stand. I don't think they
Okay.
did, but they had speakers there.
Well, I mean that's sort of lends credence to your point, because I can remember almost writing in the past that I was surprised not to see Ericsson there until I checked myself and went, hold on a sec, they don't really do fixed line.
Yeah.
And thus revealing that I'm just not very good at my job. But I managed to just stop myself.
Yeah, I guess because more and more people are talking about convergence.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the workshops I went to was specifically about the fact that the 3GPP seems to have kind of slightly overlooked the need to have a core that can support the fixed network side of things as well.
I see.
So they want, operators now want networks that will run everything, converged networks.
Makes sense.
And there's a push to get...
I mean, that presumably was always an ideal.
Yeah, but it's not been happening.
Right.
So those core network specifications have not kind of done what they need to do to kind of account for the fixed side of the business. So it's one thing that the Broadband Forum has been doing with a load of other telcos, is trying to get some recommendations together to take to the 3GPP, so these get included in the next release. So you can sort of see why there is a discussion about 5G there, and because of the overlap between the fixed and mobile side now, because convergence is the thing. And also I guess 5G being increasingly positioned by some telcos as like a fixed wireless access technology. So
that's
it's
a good
actually
point.
being used for residential
And then
broadband.
there's just the backhaul, I suppose, which the backhall's always been in place.
Yeah,
but,
so there's a lot of stuff about
perhaps because of the
fibre.
bandwidths that people are talking about with enhanced mobile broadband, the backhaul side of it becomes even more relevant. I don't know.
I mean, Jamie mentioned the Chorus presentation, which is interesting, and NBN was talking a bit about this as well, which is opportunities for those companies which are big fibre infrastructure players to kind of profit from 5G potentially by providing the backhaul connections to small cells and that sort of stuff. So
well, I mean, that's something that came up in the investment discussion. It was like, 5G, especially when you're looking at fixed wireless access, 5G isn't a competitor of broadband. It's not going to replace fibre to the last mile, because all of these fibre companies and all of these sort of fibre networks, the further you take 5G into the ecosystem, the more fibre you need on the ground. All of these, if the more of a grip 5G takes on the industry, the more fibre miles there will be in the ground. So there's obviously going to be there's a business case for both,
and it's all going to culminate in fibre sooner or later. It's just a matter of how close to the building or whatever that you take it. But
this was talking about all going to be fibre at some point, and this is something that Nokia mentioned to me, and it's a great little, I think it's a good little idea. But he's apparently he's mentioned it. It's this I can't remember his surname, Stefan Vass something or other. He's like the VP of marketing for the fixed business. Okay. And he was saying fixed wireless access, 5G fixed wireless access can be the blueprint for your fibre rollout plans over the next 10 years.
Right.
So if you connect all of the small cells, if you fibre up all the small cells and offer a fixed wireless access broadband solution to a whole city, you'll be able to see which neighbourhoods are picking up the sort of the greatest.
I see. And then roll out further infrastructure to them as and when. So it's like a stepping stone.
You can prioritise. You can say, okay, we do 5G fixed wireless access everywhere. Then all of a sudden we know that this neighbourhood is heavy user on the data, so we'll just put fibre all the way to the cabinet and to the home there. And then that can inform you as you gradually roll out fibre everywhere.
That concept makes sense. I'm just wondering about the cost of doing it as to some extent, interim technology. Presumably there's cost associated. You've got to have the small cells on the houses, on the buildings, and all that sort of thing. But I don't know the maths. I'm just asking the question. But I can certainly, it seems viable as a dip in your toe in the water sort of thing, and then working out whether you need to go
using
all
FWA.
in. Yeah. But I don't think it's very good in very sort of high density, high capacity sort of environments, is it?
Well, I guess in high density, high capacity environments, you're probably going to have fibre anyway.
Well, quite.
I mean, even in the UK where we don't have much fibre to the home, it's coming now.
Yeah.
Over the next few years.
I mean, the problem is there's no. Sorry to interrupt. There's no business case for the complete opposites. So the really low density area, there's no business case there, because unless
not for fibre, no.
No, for fixed wireless access, because you've still got to invest in putting a small cell in a suitable place. And if you're only connecting, half a dozen homes, that's not.
I'm not sure there's a
enough of
business case for
return
fixed
of
wireless
investments.
access at all.
Okay.
But I think that remains to be seen whether there's a business case for fixed wireless access.
I mean, NBN said that they were using it quite a lot in their current energy mix. In their current technology mix, 4G fixed wireless access.
Yeah.
For these sort of like urban, like the very outskirts of large.
It's a
towns
relatively
and cities.
small number of the total homes they're covering.
But it's the band right around the outskirts. That
it's
is,
suburban areas, I guess. Yeah, that's the sweet spot apparently. And that's what, if you talk about, if you look at where the trials are happening in Romania, the sort of stuff that Orange is doing, which is where all of its FWA trials are going on.
Yeah,
seems to
that's
be
where you went over there, didn't you?
Yeah, they're not in sort of really, really rural areas. They seem to be in kind of towns, mid-sized towns, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think DT's doing similar things in Germany, although it's working with Telegraph as well to do that.
Yeah, I thought we can talk about that.
And but I think there's a kind of still a bit of a question mark over the business case, and also there's this issue of propagation which keeps coming up, and it came up actually at the Broadband World Forum. Signal propagation.
Yep.
And, I know Dan Jones at Light Reading's written quite a lot about this, where the signals will go effectively through buildings and get around other obstacles, even things like foliage and stuff like that could apparently kind of cause disruption.
Well, but that's the higher the propagation characteristics of higher frequency have been discussed for a while. So you mentioned,
but that's what they're using, high frequencies. That's a problem.
But I'm not discrediting that as a genuine problem. I think it is. All I'm noting is that it's a problem that we've been aware of.
It has, but it's not a problem that they've got around.
Right.
I mean, the guy from Imagine Communications, who was they're one of Ireland's kind of small service providers. He was saying that the CPE costs, because you have outdoor equipment, I think it's still far too expensive. And
you've got to have some relays.
And
so
you've got to have relays, exactly. So
talking
you've got a lot
about
of
Telegraph. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say you've got to have a lot of infrastructure there to make it make sense. And so
the savings about of where digging up for fibre.
Yeah, what is your coverage area? If you're only covering a small number of homes with an antenna, you've got to do the cost calculations, I guess. I mean, they don't want to tell you what they asked Orange about this in Romania. What's the cost of doing this per home compared with fibre? They're like, oh, well, we're still looking into that.
Because they know if we get the numbers and we do the maths,
thing,
it's not adding up. We're going to run with it like crazy because that'd be a great story. I mean, talking about Telegraph, we didn't get a chance to talk about this on the pod because Pierre couldn't be bothered to turn up for work last Friday. But we went
off all week.
All right, okay. I didn't even notice. But we went to this Facebook event in the Excel in London, and it's Telecoms Infrastructure TIP, but it's very much a sort of Facebook sponsored thing, isn't it?
Well, it was started by them.
Yeah.
I think other people in TIP are increasingly resistant to it being seen as Facebook's
right.
thing now.
Fair enough.
Well, it has its own management team now, so
yeah. And Facebook would argue that it just wants to catalyse. It's not trying to turn itself into a networking vendor.
Well, Facebook was extremely present and visible there, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
And it had the feel of a Facebook conference.
Exactly, and they someone with some money clearly had splashed out on the catering, hadn't they? I was just stashing Snickers bars in my bag on the slide.
So was I.
But yeah, I've forgotten his name right now, but I chatted to their sort of main telecoms guy, and he was talking about Telegraph, which is over 60 gigahertz.
Yeah,
and just to
that's
remind,
Yale Maguire, isn't it?
Yeah, there was him, and then there was also his boss, whose name I also forget. So well done, Yale Maguire. I did speak to him. I think we were both in that one, weren't we?
Yeah.
Anyway, but so nor like millimeter wave, the highest frequency that we're expecting 5G to go to is about 28 gigahertz, isn't it? And this is 60 gigahertz. So it's twice as high a frequency. And one thing, I think it was Yale explained that you even get issues with oxygen.
Yeah.
Like it bumps into oxygen and has a bit of a hard time just with oxygen molecules. So there's even bigger sort of propagation challenges there, and they can be overcome. But as we say, it requires quite a lot of kicks. You've got to set up these line of sight relays.
Yeah.
I think about 200 meters was about the maximum gap you want to have between them. So as soon as you start getting into any kind of rural environment, that's just going to get silly, isn't it? And then you've got all the other stuff to do with CPE, such as getting access to sites and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You can't just stick it on top of a tree.
Yeah, I think they've not done a very good job yet, and maybe they will, of explaining why Telegraph is needed.
Yeah, and they
when you have 5G for fixed wireless access. I mean, if 5G wasn't able to address that fixed wireless access opportunity, But I remember being in that session with Yale with you and specifically asking him, does it give substantial performance boost over 5G? And he said, no, it's comparable.
Right. So what's the point?
It's on unlicensed, obviously.
Yeah.
But DT
and you
stood
can
up
get
and said that unlicensed isn't readily available in lots of parts of Europe.
No, and you can't. Presumably the performance boost is sort of per megahertz. So I think one of their arguments is there's even more real estate available. Even more spectrum real estate available up in 60, so you can have these fatter pipes, wasn't that?
Well, yeah, but then he wasn't willing to say that it was substantially faster, was he? I mean, one of the operators trialling it on the subsequent the next day, they had a massive Telegraph day. Basically,
right.
everything was about Telegraph.
Did you go the next day?
Yeah, I did. Right. And they had a couple of operators who were trialling Telegraph, Deutsche Telekom and a guy in Malaysia. I can't remember the name of his company. I think it's YTL. And he gave a presentation and said, in terms of latency and bandwidth, it was better than 5G.
Okay.
But I noticed Yale Maguire wasn't prepared to sort of stick his neck out there.
Fair enough.
I just don't see. It sounds like another WiMAX to me in the making.
Right. Okay.
It has lots of similarities. Obviously, it's based on WiGig for a start. Intel's WiGig technology is the foundation of Telegraph. And that was very much
Intel's been involved with that from the start, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that was very much WiMAX, very much an attempt by the computer industry to try and get into connectivity and come up with a 4G standard that would trump LTE. And they failed to do that, and this sort of has echoes of that. I think.
Again, it's not got the blessing of 3GPP and all the structures involved in
now it maybe there's something I'm missing, but at the moment I don't see what it's doing.
So Jamie, do you agree that the event is slightly sort of, let's say, evolving from the premise of being broadband and being a sort of broad brush telecoms event?
No. I don't agree with that necessarily. I still think it's a broadband event, but 5G is a topic in the broadband world now.
Okay, so you think that's legitimate?
Yeah. I mean,
those worlds are just colliding, so it's inevitable.
Well, yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, even stuff like they were talking about network slicing quite a lot, and 5G is a massive component of network slicing because it enables you don't have to have a fixed network and a wireless network. You can slice your single access network and have 5G backhaul in one place and then still be offering residential broadband services on the other.
So we're just getting a bit more fluid.
Ideally, if they get these specs sorted out.
That's
one of the reasons why they need this stuff to be done for release 16, basically.
I mean, that's what a lot of people I was talking about was either fixed wireless access and 5G and also network slicing. I think they're the two massive topics that I took away from the broadband event. But this, I think it's just, I just think this is the way that things are going to happen. You're going to talk. I think you're going to start talking about the network as the network, and then you're going to have you're going to have businesses on top of the single network. Gone are the days where you have your wireless. You're building two networks, one for mobile backhaul and one for residential, wireline services to businesses and residents. You're just going to have one network, and that's what I think that show is evolving to. It is just
it's almost like the Mobile World Congress isn't really the Mobile World Congress anymore, and there's increasingly talk of fixed technologies at the Mobile World Congress. DT did a presentation all about PanNet, on its stand, with the CEO talking about that's very much a fixed line.
Well, I guess no one's saying that just because an event's got a name, you got to sort of slavishly stick to it, I guess.
You haven't. I just feel it's I like specialised. I mean, you could have an NG-PON2 event where you pretty much know that it's all going to be very, very focused on one thing.
And you just like a deep dive into that particular sort of area, whereas this is more top line.
There was nothing wrong with the presentations. It was all very good.
Okay.
I wonder from a sort of sponsorship point of view, I guess, an exhibitor's point of view, whether there's a sense that there's a need for more focus.
We could go and talk to our colleagues on the...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and it certainly seemed busy, and it seemed to be... Some of the stands looked to be doing very well. So
cool.
I just wonder whether, I mean, that's something you have to talk to exhibitors about. Yet, do they want something that's really kind of focused, where they know everybody there is specifically interested in one kind of technology, or do they like these?
Yeah, and some of that's timing,
brush?
I suppose, as well. I mean, this is probably not a bad time of year. We're obviously miles away from Mobile Congress. I know there's some other ones like that one in the US. but maybe this isn't a bad time of year to have a more general European-based telecoms event, because there hasn't been one for a while. Cool. What did I do? So I was off in Hong Kong. I was there. Qualcomm had something called the 4G/5G Summit, but it was almost entirely 5G.
Yeah. You don't want to be talking about 4G these days.
Presumably there were some people within. Presumably there's some people within Qualcomm who insisted on that. Generally, if you ever read like a Qualcomm press release, it's clearly been through several pairs of hands, many of which are lawyers, before it gets into the public domain. So everything gets quite sort of, it's done by committee and fine-tuned before they release it. So that might be one reason. But it's basically a 5G event in a really nice venue called the Kerry Hotel in Hong Kong, which basically overlooks the sort of bay, the harbour, whatever. And then you can see Hong Kong Island on the other side and all the skyscrapers. All that sort of, I've never been to Hong Kong before. So, yeah, it's a pretty cool place.
What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hectic. It's so built up.
Yeah.
Even just like the residential blocks of flats are about 40 stories high.
Yeah. Were you on a sort of high level in your hotel?
Not in the hotel, no. But we did go into a restaurant where you got a view over it.
Yeah.
I remarked it looked like Blade Runner, because there's just so much neon everywhere.
Yeah.
And all that sort of thing. And we went out one night and saw the sort of Hong Kong nightlife, which it seems to be a real city that never sleeps.
Yeah.
So that was
Lang Kwai Fok. Did you go there? That area? It's like the nightclub area.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah.
That's probably it. And that was all good fun.
Yeah.
But in terms of the day job, basically Qualcomm. So they've been spending all year trying really hard to make sure that they're positioned as strongly as possible for 5G. And as I wrote in my write-up, Qualcomm, not in a unique position, but it's in a position. It's in certainly a position where more than most other companies, with each new generation of wireless technology, it can't afford.
It has something to lose, I suppose.
It has a lot to lose.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a brief sort of historical recap of Qualcomm, they only really came to prominence in the 3G era, because they had such a lot of the IP in the standard. And that led to all sorts of aggro about how much people should have to pay Qualcomm every time they stick a 3G modem in a device. But one thing Qualcomm's not short of is lawyers.
Yeah.
And then,
but they've sort of retained that position in 4G, haven't they? Or have they?
Well,
not?
yeah, but they've had to evolve it. So there's a gradual evolution and diversification, because I don't think they've ever been able to retain quite as much of a piece of the standard in terms of like commanding royalties.
So 3G, they were pretty much the dominant player. They have less of the pie in 4G, basically. And what's the perception? Are they going to end up with even less?
Well, exactly.
5G,
so with 5G, I don't know in terms of numbers. I mean, certainly when I went and visited Ericsson a few months back, they were talking up about how they're the biggest contributors to the standard by number of patents.
Right.
So I think let's assume, this is an assumption rather than me knowing for a fact, that with each new generation it's a bit more diluted because there's more stakeholders, there's more people realising how high the stakes are. I think Qualcomm perhaps had the advantage of just being ahead of the game 20 years ago, where people didn't realise quite what a windfall having a big part of the standard would be. And so they're diversified. So by the time we got to the 4G era, they were already investing very heavily in the Snapdragon brand, their system on chip that also has application processors, graphics processors, digital signal processors, all kinds of silicon all wrapped into one, which is where system on a chip, SoC, comes from. So they were already doing that quite a lot with Snapdragon, and they did pretty well with Snapdragon. For a while, they're in
a lot of smartphones.
Yeah, well, for a while they were pretty much the only game in town because people like Texas Instruments were disappearing,
right?
And Qualcomm was kicking ass on that one. But since then, in the intervening 10 years since the 4G era started, vendors have increasingly started making their own SoCs, or at least their own application processors. So Apple does that. You got this A10 chip or whatever. Huawei does its own chip. Samsung has got Exynos, but it sometimes uses Snapdragon, God knows why, in different areas. And this is all facilitated by ARM and the way ARM does business, which is just to sell designs rather than sell actual products or license designs. So Qualcomm's got to keep diversifying, and a big theme of this show was it talking about all the other areas it's involved in, such as automotive, such as VR, AR, such as artificial intelligence, such as wearables, all that jazz.
So it's trying to sort of pump more into those to
Yeah.
compensate for this perception that it's kind of licensing
I
stuff
think
might
so.
be going downhill.
Qualcomm probably wouldn't
Yeah.
agree with that exact characterization,
Yeah.
but that's my reading between the lines.
Yeah.
I think diversifying is a good idea in general if you do it right, but there seems to be a particular urgency to this diversification that I
Yeah.
detect, that I've been seeing all year. But one other like positive shout out I'll give to Qualcomm actually is that it's good that they're doing events like this, because not many people are. 10 years ago, Ericsson would have been doing massive events that we would have turned up to, and they would have been us all this hotel and flying around and going out on the lash in the evening and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't do it anymore. Nokia doesn't really do it, do they? Huawei doesn't seem to be their style, although we did have that thing in Wujian a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, they were announcing that they're going to take that down a notch. So pretty much everyone's doing less of this, and Qualcomm's still prepared. So they rented out this Kerry Hotel, which is like a 5-star hotel right on the waterfront, put everyone up there, rented out all their ballroom, did all their death by PowerPoint there. 3 days of it, I might add. I know that got punishing at times. Basically they're bothering to drop some serious change on telling partners, customers, analysts. They're all loads of analysts there as well.
A lot of press, a lot of other press, or
yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
So they flew out a few. There were 1 or 2 other from the UK, a few from sort of other sort of European countries. So yeah, I just think fair play to them on that, and I just wish more other companies did it. Not that I was necessarily looking forward to flying to Hong Kong for such a short amount of time, because I only flew out on Sunday
yeah.
and then flew back overnight Wednesday to Thursday. So I was only on the ground for about 2 solid
you're
days.
feeling great now.
Well, I had a decent night's kit last night, but yeah, I was properly struggling yesterday. Those times where you literally can't keep your eyes open.
And did they have like any of their partners there as well?
Tons of them, yeah.
They did.
There was all that. I mean,
So is there any more update on when we're going to see? Because there's always this speculation about when the first 5G devices are going to appear, aren't there? Is there any?
Yeah, I asked a
kind of
question
bringing
about.
forwards of timelines, or
Well,
LG are supposed to be bringing out the first one, aren't they?
Right.
LG,
Quite possibly.
LG and Motorola, and I think Verizon's got exclusivity to sell through their channels for
Right.
one of them.
Yeah.
But I think that's supposed to be
Q1.
first half Q1, Q2 2019, and then
And I asked the EMEA guy about when we're going to see him in Europe, and he reckoned Q2. So that's
yeah. But this is going to be. I mean, it's going to be the crap phones. Really, you're not going to see. They're just going to try and rush to beat the punch, aren't they? Because they know they can't compete with the likes of Huawei, Samsung, and Apple on quality.
yeah.
So they got to be
possibly.
They got
But
to
I think crap
be
phones
first
might
to
be
market.
a slightly harsh character.
Well, you know what I mean,
the
but
tier 2 vendors.
But yeah, but then they're not going to beat them on quality, so they have to offer something
Yeah.
that the big boys can't. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is something I'm concerned about with the first 5G compatible phones, is that they're just not going to be very good. There's going to be so many mistakes and oversights because there is this rush to the finish line.
Is that what happened with 4G as well? I'm trying to recall now, but I mean, Apple didn't rush to get a 4G phone.
No.
You're
did they?
talking before my time there, Ian. You know,
No.
I was still,
He was still running around the valleys,
Still running around the
chasing a
university
rugby
halls.
ball. Yes. No, I think you're right, Jamie. And but I think that applies to sort of early devices aimed at early adopters a fair bit.
I think that was true with 3G, sorry.
Right.
But 4G, I didn't
3G.
see.
How were you when 3G came out, man?
But I don't
No,
recall.
that was like 2003, 2004.
Right.
I don't
The
recall
phones
Apple
were
sort of
heating up.
being
No, well,
having
actually,
a
I've
great
got another
rush to
little thing to say about Apple in that context. But yeah, I think you're right, Jamie. That the first ones are for early adopters only, and they shouldn't be whinging when it turns out to have teething problems. You're basically being a willing guinea pig as an early adopter as well.
Yeah.
I could say.
Yeah.
But this is why I think the likes of Huawei, the likes of Apple and Samsung, they'll take their time because they know they've got so much more to lose.
Yeah.
Gaining market share is an important thing for Motorola and LG.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the likes of Apple, Samsung,
Yeah.
and Huawei, any mistake they'll lose considerable market share.
And why go too early? I mean, the network support's not going to be there.
No.
So even if you've got a 5G modem in your phone, you're probably not going to be able to use it 99% of the time anyway. So one thing about Apple, I was chatting to some Qualcomm people, and a bit of a tangent. There's been this constant aggro.
They love Apple, don't they?
Yeah, there's been this constant aggro between Qualcomm and Apple all year. And So Apple in 5G is going to be interesting because it seems clear that Qualcomm has succeeded in being ahead of the game in producing 5G modems, and Apple's just switched. The latest iPhones are all just got Intel modems, and one thing,
All of them.
the latest generation of Apple phones are all Intel modem only,
Okay.
which they've been threatening to do, and Qualcomm wasn't surprised by. But one thing that happened after that is Qualcomm went, hold on a second, how come Intel suddenly got so good at modems? And they've accused Apple of basically giving Intel some Qualcomm intellectual property
Right.
in order to get it up to speed. Well,
Have they got proof of that?
this is it. Apparently they do.
They
And-
were given an opportunity towards it recently, weren't they?
Well, there's a court filing that I heard about that says that because they've been able to do subpoenas and been able to do email audits and like that,
Yeah.
and apparently there's emails between Apple engineers and Intel engineers going, here's some cool technology, why don't you use that? And apparently even like offering to sort of send over unencrypted files and all that sort of thing. So I'm saying this now because I was told it's in the public domain. If it's not in the public domain, then please don't sue me, whoever might sue me.
You've just broken the news.
I don't think I have. Although I hope to get hold of the documents and write it up, because even if it's not new, not many people have written it up.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the long and short of it, that's not going to result in anything dramatic like an injunction against iPhones or that sort of thing. All these things are just bargaining chips in the great legal dick-waving competition that they're having.
Yeah.
But if, so Apple's saying we shouldn't have to pay Qualcomm so much money. Apparently they got billions of dollars of, or through their partners, billions of dollars of license fees that they haven't paid. And then any dirt that Qualcomm can get on Apple, such as it may be sharing secrets with Intel, becomes a bargaining chip in that table, because they'll eventually settle. But now, if they can prove that, then that puts Apple in a much weaker position when it comes to settling and paying up.
Because Apple
and all
sort of
that
was
sort
the
of
one that launched hostilities in the first place, wasn't there, in this long dispute, by basically just accusing Qualcomm of charging too much.
Yeah.
But that's.
But they've presumably been arguing the toss over how much they charge for quite a long time, and Apple's pretty ruthless with
charging
its
too
partners.
much is one thing, but actually flogging somebody else's intellectual property is
Quite.
another.
So I'll stress that until I read the court documents, I don't know exactly what's happening there, but that's certainly the accusation. I'm not saying how accurate it might be, but Apple's like that. Their graphics, their GPU partner was Imagination Technologies for a while, and then Apple just unilaterally ditched them. They recently bought another company which they'd apparently been saying they weren't going to bother working with before, so their market value went down. And Tim Cook, don't forget, the guy who took over from Steve Jobs, he's a supply chain guy. He's very good at increasing margin by putting pressure on component suppliers and other partners. So anyway, that's just an interesting bit of dirt. It'll be interesting to see how that comes out. But in the meanwhile, back to your questions about iPhones going on 5G. If we assume that Intel's behind the curve, and maybe Intel will see this and go, no, you're talking shit, we're great at 5G. But if we assume they're behind the curve compared to Qualcomm, then is Apple going to be at a further disadvantage now that it seems to be apparently refusing to use Qualcomm modems? Is it going to be a further disadvantage when it's got to wait for Intel to get its shit together, and other people like Huawei and Samsung are all just piling in with Qualcomm 5G modems?
Not if it flogs intellectual property to
Well,
Intel.
there we go. That's one way round it, isn't it? So that's actually before we move on to quarterly, seeing as we're talking about phones and Huawei and all that sort of thing. So Jamie, when we went to this TIP conference in the same venue, Excel, there was Huawei launching a new phone. Is that the very phone you have in your hand?
It is.
Show it to the camera.
It's I'll give it.
He loves it.
It's got his mucky paw prints all over it.
It's good. It's good. The new Mate, the Mate 20 Pro. This is,
So
and
that's their flagship.
This is their new flagship. It's and it's great. It's really, really good. I mean,
I can vouch for the picture quality. It is like you make it bigger
good.
and everything's still really, really sharp.
The camera quality
talking
is
about
absolutely
photos.
amazing.
Photos, yeah.
It has Face and Touch ID. That's cool.
Yeah, Face and Touch ID, which
Right.
works almost instantaneously. The actual performance on the phone is remarkably good. They just got little things like there's alongside the Google the Android system.
Yeah,
they've got this thing called EMU.
Yeah, their skin.
Yeah,
sort of UI.
But then at the same time, it does help you with performance as well. So it helps you. It it helps
So-
with faster loading, like the applications it recognises the applications that you use most, and it sort of helps them. It prioritises them over other applications,
Right,
so
right.
they load and perform
Okay.
faster. And it's good. I don't know whether
Excellent.
I'd pay 900
Odd
or
quid for it.
or
I thought it was
750. 750, yeah.
What's
It's only
the,
7. I mean, that's cheap compared to some flagships. Oh,
well, it's
I mean,
cheap
I
compared
don't-
to the
It's
one that
gone
Pierre's
flaccid.
got.
It's cheap compared to Pierre's, yeah. But I mean, I don't know whether
Shut
I'd
up.
pay for it. But
What's the battery life like on it?
really, really good. We were actually talking about this downstairs before we came up.
Right.
Like it
'Cause
charges.
that's always the thing, I think, on smartphones. These
Yeah,
days,
yeah. I mean, it charges really, really quickly, and they're claiming. So in the press conference, they reckon you can get 11 and a half hours out of it
Right.
for heavy use.
right.
And I was a bit
Well,
sceptical.
you'd be the perfect
Right.
test of heavy use, wouldn't you?
And I was a bit sceptical, and then all of a sudden, but do you know what? I mean, I've had it on all day since I woke up this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I played music on the commute in,
Play golf.
played computer games, and it's still on 64% now.
I think it's
Um,
4,000 milliamps, and mine is like 2,700.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's 4,200.
And what
maybe?
kind of
Oh,
life
wow.
what kind of battery life do you get out of your iPhone X?
I don't really measure it.
But I mean, like, do
I
you have
charge
to
it
top it
once
up?
a day. Yeah.
So you can leave the house and it's still all right by the time you get home.
Yeah.
What percent's it on by the time you get home, typically?
35.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not terrible.
That's
It's,
okay.
I don't
it's,
use
it's
it.
fairly new though, isn't it? It's how quickly that deteriorates.
Yeah,
Ah,
it's
yes.
like
Well,
2
we had
years.
that other story as well about them getting them and
But now
Samsung
you
getting
can
done
choose.
for.
You can choose to basically harm your battery more and keep
Okay.
the CPU at the same speed.
Oh, so you can clock the CPU up or down, can you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Cool. Well, I look forward to your comprehensive review of that Huawei phone.
How many days
see
are
if
you
you
in?
could-
How many days are you in?
Week.
Mm,
Got it last week.
Nice.
You got it for 2 weeks, yeah.
I
If
don't
you
know.
still love it after a week, that's
Okay.
pretty good.
Just keep your head down. Don't mention it on podcasts or anything, and they might forget that you got it. Okay.
I'll just delete this whole part.
Yes, the whole part. Just replace it with some nonchalant whistling.
We'll have to get him something else though if it goes back. So,
Well, it could.
so-
that's the other thing. I mean, I don't doubt
We'll have to get
everything
him a present.
that Jamie said is true, but you are comparing it to a pretty sort of mid-range device that you had before, weren't you? Some
Yeah.
sort of fairly bog
No,
standard.
it's pretty good.
Motorola. So I guess that's just
like
a reminder.
trading in your Volvo for a Lamborghini or
something like that. Yeah.
Hey, Volvos are cool.
Yeah.
They're nice.
Okay, so we're running out of time. Well, just the only other major stuff. So we haven't obviously between us been writing much other news because we've been gallivanting around Berlin and Hong Kong and that sort of thing. But we're in the middle of quarterly season. I wrote up Ericsson, I think, last week, and they seem to be doing all right. I mean, their numbers weren't amazing, but they were still heading in the right direction. I think the biggest thing we were looking for with Ericsson is any loss of momentum from the recovery that's been happening most of this year.
Mm.
And I don't think there was a loss of momentum. I don't think there didn't seem to be a massive acceleration.
There was quite a big acceleration in
Oh,
the
was there?
operating margin. Yeah,
So
it's
the
up-
margin was their
so
big.
the margin's up from
Okay.
0.3% to 6% in the
Fair enough.
between the
I
second
stand
and third
corrected.
quarters.
No, that's a good point. And I was going to say
And
that they've actually made a
they're
proper
only
profit.
trying to get it to 10 by 2020. So
Okay, fair play.
I mean, I think their recovery is assured. The question for them is what next, really.
Okay, cool.
Um,
I probably downplayed the extent.
and they've
of
gone
their
up a
recovery
lot
there.
recently. If you look at the share price performance as well,
Right.
they're almost at the point they were back when in late 2015, when everything was tickety boo and they had higher profits than ever.
Okay.
I think, and yet they're still not dazzling. So you kind of think there can't be much more gain for this stock to enjoy. I don't think.
So you think a
look at it.
degree of sort of future
I think they're
optimism is priced
topping
into
out. Yeah, Ericsson.
it. Fair enough.
uh,
So I mean, Ekholm must
I
have
think
been
he's
doing
done a really good
half-decent
job of getting it back in shape
Yeah.
in terms of. I mean, this is a quarterly performance. It's 6%. Obviously, across the full year, it's going to be less than that.
Yeah. But year on year difference.
But it's
Yeah.
it's a big improvement, and the
they're
networks
making an
business now
actual
is
profit.
doing quite well in terms
Yeah.
of organic growth. The main issues with Ericsson are on the. First of all, its focus quite narrow nowadays, just radio access networks really, and then the digital services bit is still quite
Yeah,
problematic.
that was having a bit of a mare.
I mean, they've still got quite a lot of work to do to get that into decent shape, I think.
Yes,
But,
agreed.
um,
But
that's my
I
sort
think
of
that
take.
one of the reasons the margin's gone so well is they've done this great big cost cutting and
Yeah.
and it seems
It's
to have
1 in
paid off.
5 staff has gone over.
They've
the
only
last
got
2
about
years.
2 employees, but they're making some decent margin.
Yeah.
And then Nokia more recently, you just wrote them up, Jamie, the other day.
Yeah.
What was the general take on Nokia's numbers?
They're doing all right. 1%, 1% decline.
What is that, sales?
Yeah,
Right.
year on year, but then it's slowing. The curve is just slowing down because the previous, I think it was in the previous year, it was a 5% year on year decline.
Okay.
So they're slowing,
relative.
getting rid of the legacy, moving on to the future-proof businesses and the future-proof platforms. So they are making progress there. Big cost cutting initiative. 700 million to try and cut back over the next 2 years, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But that was a new one, a new lot of cost cutting.
It
wasn't
is.
It?
They've already
Yes.
got their program that's due
Yeah.
to finish this year, which is 1.2 billion. So this is on.
So
top
things
of
can't be
that.
going that great if they're announcing another cost cutting, or is that too simpler?
Well,
conclusion?
they've got. I think they've got quite ambitious margin targets.
Okay,
They're aiming for about 12 to 16%, I think, in the long term.
right.
And they've obviously the cost cuts they've made so far. This 1.2 billion is not going to get them to that level.
I see.
So
And he also said, I
Um,
think the CFO, I can't remember what his surname is, or
Palola. Christian
yeah, I
Palola,
can't
yeah.
remember how to pronounce it.
yeah.
He turned around and said, "Yeah, we still got to rationalise the Alcatel-Lucent
Right. So
acquisition."
they haven't done a full
Well,
shakedown of that.
that's funny
Yeah.
that because I asked him about that because they previously claimed that was all done, that
Right.
integration. But
And we were all going, "Oh, that
Um,
went well."
yeah,
Well, so what he said to
Um,
me was the integration is done, but we haven't
there's
realised
still overlap.
the economies.
Basically,
Well, he said the economies of scale in terms of pool and procurement power as well. So he just said, instead of we've got 7 or 8 different business units buy-in from 7 or 8 different vendors, and it just says simple things like that. If we pool all of it into a single procurement strategy.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily. I mean, I dare say there's
so it's
still
cost cuts.
yeah. I still say there's still overlap in terms of like shared services and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, all the messages about the operating cost savings are that it's mainly going to come in staff.
Yeah, well, that's
It's-
generally
it's-
where it is, isn't it?
Yeah, they're saying
They
some
just
is
get it by buying
some is
cheaper furniture
property.
or something.
They deny it's all to do with that. They're
Right.
saying some is property related and some is from other things. But I think it's 700 million in costs, 500 million in operating costs.
Yeah.
And then out of that, if you look at the kind of paragraph about where those cuts are going to be found, it's all from things like automation of functions
Yeah.
and cutting out central services, cutting back on central services, and
Cutting back on legacy support as well,
yeah,
and stuff like that.
they it's funny because if you look at their sort of staff numbers, they have the appearance of being quite sort of bloated, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. Well, they're about 103,000 employees. I think Ericsson's now down to about 95,000. So
Okay.
they're quite a bit bigger. I mean, I know they have a more diverse range of businesses,
Yep.
Nokia, but I don't get the impression they've shrunk that much in the last. I mean, Ericsson's obviously gone through this. What is it? 22,000 people,
Yeah.
I think, in 2 years have gone. I don't think there's anything
Maybe there
on that
was-
scale that's kind of happened.
Maybe
at
there was a bit
Nokia,
of
but
putting off of the kind of redundancies that are normally inevitable from massive M&A,
that's the feeling
because
you
they
get,
might have been
yeah.
worried about people like us going, "Oh, look what they're doing to."
Well, there were
There
reports, remember, coming out about cuts and everything.
That's probably coming
but
over on the mic, by the way. That constant rustling that you're doing.
I think there were press reports about cuts they were making, but it's never seemed to have been on that sort of epic Ericsson scale that you had.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
now it looks like we might be heading for something like that.
They seem to have managed investor expectations just a bit better as well. You look at what it's Suri. What is that?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Let's see.
Has done. He seems to have managed expectations and literally said to them, "Look,
Up
this
to last
is gonna
year,
be, this period between 4G and 5G is
Yeah.
going to be
we've
it's
had that
not
a few
going to
times.
be
Yeah.
easy." And they seem to have bought it.
well, the stock's not going down, but it's not really doing anything.
No.
I think it has gone down earlier this year a bit.
I mean, I think not doing anything in between the two investment cycles is I think is a win, to be perfectly honest.
Except now that Ericsson's getting its over, that puts a bit more pressure on them, I think.
Well, they're under quite a lot of pressure anyway because they didn't meet expectations in the quarter.
Right.
And they've got, I think they're guiding, so on the network side, they're guiding for a margin of 6 to 9% this year. They're currently about 5%.
Okay.
So they've got to have a really good final quarter.
They do some
I mean,
hardcore sacking.
He acknowledged there was a risk in the fourth
Okay.
quarter
Fair enough.
about whether they could.
A lot. It's a lot depends on new 5G contracts, isn't it?
It's
So-
contract. It's execution of contracts and also the components issues.
Yeah.
Apparently, supply chain issues.
Right. Okay.
Um,
All All right, and then one other one. I saw you wrote this up as well, Ian. ZTE.
Yeah.
I mean, it had actually sort of forecast that it was going to make a profit in this quarter, and it did. It was about in the middle of its guidance that it came out with a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But when you consider the absolute nightmare it's had all year,
It's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, one point I did make
Still
at
a
the end
massive
of
loss for the full year, though.
still a massive loss. Yeah, I saw you focus on that more than I did. I'm not saying you were wrong to do so, but I just sort of focus on the fact that of having had such a nightmare, both in terms of fines and in terms of loss of business. It's remarkable, A, that it's managing to turn a profit, and B, when you actually look at its year-on-year revenue thing, it's only down about 25% or something.
Yeah.
And when you consider that in May, and I look back at the story, they were basically saying we're dead.
Yeah.
They were saying it's game over.
Well, it was game over if it had carried on.
The only thing is, it was only business shut down for.
It was a few
4 or
weeks.
5
Yeah.
weeks.
I mean, I think
wasn't
the
it?
thing they were worried about at the time was if they couldn't ever get US components again, they were dead.
Yeah.
And that would have happened.
But it
because
just
they couldn't
seemed
replace
slightly,
those.
bearing in mind how they've managed to keep revenue trickling along,
Yeah.
it just seemed like back then maybe they were, I think my phrase was hamming it up a little bit.
Well, I just think that they meant that if we don't ever get to buy US components,
Then we really are screwed.
Dead. I'm still not convinced that they're, back. I don't.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of it's probably driven by business in China.
Yeah.
Because I suspect that knowing what
Africa,
happens
they're
in
big in
China,
Africa as
they're big
well,
in
aren't
Africa, but the Chinese government will no doubt
Chinese
lean
government
on
would
the
have thrown them a lot of
operators
bones.
to go and use ZTE and Huawei more, given their difficulties.
Yeah,
in other parts
and
of the
maybe
world.
just giving them like little bridge to
And
nowhere projects.
Yeah, I just wonder
pork
whether
barrel
any operators
spending.
are ever going to look at them again outside China and go,
Well, that's a
this is
much bigger
twice
long-term
now.
problem.
They had the fine in 2017, and then they came back after that.
And they still took the piss.
And then they apparently didn't do what they said they were going to do
Yeah.
and got penalised again. So they're always going to be the company that.
But don't forget, like if you're talking about, are you lumping Huawei in there as well, or?
No, I'm just
or
talking about
ZTE?
ZTE.
Okay, Z. Because okay.
I mean, they're quite a small player. They don't have, they're always been a bit
distinct
sort of
fourth.
marginal.
Yeah.
And some of these operators kind of threw their lot in entirely, it seems, with ZTE. People like Vaon.
Yeah.
And Windtrade did a big deal at the end of last year. And Windtrade, in its last set of results, I remember,
bail.
blamed ZTE. Or sort
Okay.
of blamed the issues that it had for a load of network problems,
I
and
see.
they'd lost customers, and they brought Ericsson back into the
Yes,
mix. So,
indeed.
and I remember we were both talking to our friend Bengt Nordstrom
Yeah.
of Nord Stream about this, and he was saying what it's going to do is make telcos think, well, there's no way I can rely on a single supplier
Definitely
now.
not.
So all those, and especially if you're using ZTE on that basis, all of those customers will have gone and started talks at least, or relationships with other vendors.
But they've been saying that for a long time, though. I mean, this
Say
idea
what?
that
Vendor locking.
Huawei's success is going to lead to a resurgence in players like Nokia and ZTE and Ericsson, just purely because everyone is Nokia is so far ahead. You've got to sacrifice on performance. Take the second best option, maybe. I'm not saying that operators have been saying this or that these options are second best, but you might have to take the second best option just to add a bit of variety into your portfolio. I mean, that was something that I won't name the company that said it to me, but they said it to me when I was out in Lisbon at another vendors. I don't want to drop anyone in trouble here.
Exactly.
Basically, at the beginning of
To
last
walk a
year.
tightrope here.
But even more
Beginning of
so
last
with
year, yeah.
if ZTE's gone and it's all of a sudden look like it's going to go out of business, you don't want to go and have a single
You
supplier
realise how
deal with
utterly exposed
ZTE.
you are.
So
Yeah.
I totally agree, but it's made that even more apparent that you can't just have a deal with one vendor, and certainly not a small vendor that has twice been in trouble with US authorities.
So it'd be
And
interesting.
there's all the scrutiny now of the Chinese kind of companies anyway that's going on.
So it'd be worth keeping an eye on the geographical split for ZTE, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I agree with Jamie about Africa. I think he's always
Yeah.
going to be a big market because it's obviously a low-cost market,
Yeah.
and the Chinese are big generally in Africa
They
for
are
infrastructure projects.
It's not going to be a particular interest to. I mean, especially with someone like with the European players who are after the high margin stuff, the really high profitable stuff. I'm not saying they're going to ignore Africa,
Yeah,
but ZTE and maybe Huawei. I can imagine ZTE is probably the ones that are really pumping money into Africa because it should be a big opportunity for them. You know,
Well, they
Yeah.
certainly needn't bother doing much marketing in the States for a while. I think they can
No.
spare themselves that overhead.
I kind of wonder which other countries are going to come out, and there's now stuff going on in Canada, isn't there, about using Huawei and ZTE.
Is
whether
it?
it's-
no, they said they're not going to ban
Well, a few
them.
weeks
no,
ago,
but it's a conversation that's happening.
Yeah.
It's a conversation that's happening everywhere now. It's Australia's banned them from
Yeah.
5G. There were reports that Japan's looking at this as
again,
well.
but they haven't turned into
There's a
anything.
conversation happening in Canada, whether there's no decision that's been taken to block them. And then you even have the UK, I think, raising sort of cyber concerns earlier
Well,
this year.
I'd be very surprised
Um,
if the US government isn't chatting to its allies and going.
Of course, yeah, no doubt.
know.
Well, I mean, I think that's clearly the case in Canada. I think
Because
it's obviously
if there's like
leaned on them.
intelligence sharing and that sort of thing, I suppose the Americans
and
could
that,
argue
that
they've
was
got a
brought up
direct
by
interest.
the US with
Yeah.
Canada.
No, but the Canadian one, the PM did come out and say he explicitly said we're not banning.
Well, he
Huawei.
said we haven't made a decision. We're certainly not going to make it based on.
He said we're not going to follow the path of the
Yeah.
US. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure.
I
Yeah.
saw that he'd said we're not going to make a decision based on the US sort of leading.
We'll
on
make
that,
our
so
own
we'll
call.
make our own call on it.
Yeah, something like that.
And
Something
hadn't
like
sort
that.
of ruled it out one way or the other.
I
but-
mean, to be honest, they're never going to get banned in the UK. There's too much dependence on it. The UK networks are too dependent on Huawei as a supplier, and they've got that fail-safe of.
yeah, but that can
bloody
surely be swapped out.
No, yeah, but at what expense?
I don't know, but
What it-
operators. And this is the conversation in the industry, isn't it? They don't want to be tied into one vendor anyway anymore.
Yeah,
They don't want to be able to.
But it's not just about moving forward. It's about all the billions and billions and billions that has been spent over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
With Huawei, if you're not going to procure stuff off them in the future, you've got to have the same assumption that the stuff that you procured off them in the past is compromised as well. So if you're going to ban them from any future procurement, you've got to replace everything in the network.
Well,
Otherwise,
you
there's
can
no
obviously
point.
do it because Deutsche Telekom's done it. Deutsche Telekom's replaced Nokia in Germany with Ericsson.
But have they?
So it can obviously be done.
But have they replaced all of the Nokia components that were already in
Well,
the network?
that's okay. That's true. I don't know about that.
I mean, that's if there's a genuine threat, that's what they'd have.
Well,
to
the only
do.
thing I'll say about that, Jamie, and we're going to have to call this to a close soon because we've done nearly an hour, I think, is obviously the specific thing that the US and Australia, well, Australia explicitly have said that they don't trust Huawei in a 5G context. So I don't know to what extent this sort of historical stuff
Well,
would
the
apply.
US is more general than that, isn't it?
Yeah, but then they've had them
Um,
banned for a while. So
they
they
have,
haven't got the
apparently
problem that
they've-
Jamie was describing
Well,
about
I don't know
legacy.
if they don't have that problem actually. I think Sprint's network was supposed to have had Huawei equipment in it.
Oh, was it?
Dan-
Oh, yeah, because it
we
was just
wrote about
public.
this,
It was
yeah.
just public sector,
So
wasn't it?
there's
Yeah, yeah.
equipment, there's Huawei equipment. I don't know if it's still there, but there was supposed to be Huawei equipment in Sprint's
Yeah.
network.
But
And
does that mean that they've never been able to pursue government contracts or anything like that?
well, this ban on Huawei has been 2012. I think that government warning got written.
Just that
The
government warning.
situation
But-
before then, I don't think.
But
was,
Jamie's question is,
that,
if you're
um,
a network operator and you've got Huawei kit in your
Well,
system, does that mean that,
I don't know
the
if it's-
government sort
that-
of gives
does
you a
that-
wide berth?
Because
Well,
that's what the future procurement thing is, isn't it?
Well, I don't know how well this
Yeah.
stuff's scrutinised, though. Yeah, because the government's saying,
Okay.
yeah, we don't want you doing dealings with them. The fact they don't have dealings with them now might be enough for them
But-
to have
Because I
a
think
government contract.
moving forward, the latest one, I think the language was, I can't remember what the exact language was, but it's saying you're not allowed to procure any ZTE, or I think they said Chinese components essentially, but ZTE or Huawei equipment or services, that information will touch or traverse across. So that's basically any useful contract or meaningful contract in the communications world. ZTE and Huawei are banned from now. But I don't know what that means.
But I take your point,
Yeah,
Jamie,
they can't
about
do
the
anything.
about the historical stuff. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes. So I mean, just to, we got onto this. We're talking about ZTE. They've still got. I agree with you, Ian. They've still got a lot of potential challenges before we can say they're back in business. But I'm sure for them, being able to report a profit.
No,
massively significant.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's that's a good sign, and maybe they will bounce back. They did it last year, but you just kind of feel people are going to look at them with a certain wariness.
Totally, and just not even if they don't think they did anything wrong, just like, am I going to take the risk that they're going to get in the shit with the Americans
it's a
again?
bloody nightmare for the industry, though. You
Yeah.
know, basically having in the fixed business taking Huawei and ZTE out. You
Yeah.
know, what's that doing for competition?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a nightmare.
Yeah, you got to imagine that Nokia, Samsung, and Ericsson are able to charge a decent premium in the States.
Well,
I'm
it's
sure
good that
they'd never
Samsung's kind
confirm
of
that.
coming into the picture a bit more.
Yeah, Verizon has given it a
Um,
real boost in
yeah.
credibility, isn't it?
And they're doing deals in places like India as well, and they
Yeah.
seem to be kind of.
They're pretty
you
strong
know,
on small cells and that sort of
they'd
thing.
be a
aren't
good company for us to try and speak to, on the guy who's
Well,
in charge of the network side of
they?
Samsung.
Maybe Jamie
because-
can ponce a phone off them. Okay, we better on that note. We better wrap it up. But thanks a lot, guys, and thank you for listening. Make sure you join us for the next one.